There we go. We're recording. All right. So good morning, everybody. We are picking up in Exodus 21. We worked through the 10 Commandments last time. So now we're going to be working through, there are other laws that were given at the same time, and that's what we're going to work through today. We'll see how far we get through those. This is page 38 in your study guides. Let's go ahead and begin with prayer, and then we'll dive in. Lord, thank you for giving us the opportunity to gather through both being able to meet in person to keep us healthy and strong, and those also meeting online as they take care of their bodies as well. Bless us as we read and study your word. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, so Exodus 21, and we're going to see if we can get through 23 today. The laws and topics provided in the Book of the Covenant receive more detailed treatment in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. They appear to address the immediate issues of the people dwelling in Sinai. Later, the laws could more fully anticipate how the people would live in the Promised Land. Following Christian tradition, Philip Melanchthon divides the laws and topics in the Book of the Covenant in this way. There are three general divisions of the Mosaic law: the moral laws, the ceremonial laws, and the civil or judicial laws. The ceremonial laws of Moses and the civil laws are not commanded to the other nations, nor are they binding upon us. They were given to the people of Israel for that time in order that the political structure might continue for a definite period of time, so that there might be a specific place in which the Christ should be born and reveal himself, be proclaimed, and become the sacrifice and openly complete the work of our eternal life. The moral laws have been summarized by God in a remarkable way on one small table, which is called the Decalogue, 10 words of 10 commandments. So we'll read Exodus 21. And I want you we'll just go first 11 verses. Gavin's going to hit play in just a second. And so the question I want you to think about is, what stands out to you in the laws regarding servants and slaves? Those words are kind of interchangeable as far as defining them. Slave could be a servant, servant could be a slave. So think about it in either context. I know we think of those two as very drastically different. They would not as much. So what stands out to you in the laws regarding servants and slaves? What does it show us about the Lord? So hit it, Gavin.
Exodus 21. These are the laws you are to set before them. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years. In the 7th year he shall go free, without paying anything. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife when he comes, she is to go with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. But if the servant declares, I love my master and my wife and children, and do not want to go free, then his master must take him before the judges. He shall take him to the door or the doorpost, and pierce his ear with an awl. Then he will be his servant for life. If a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free as male servants do. If she does not please the master who has selected her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners, because he has broken faith with her. If he selects her for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. If he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, and marital rights. If he does not provide her with these 3 things, she is to go free without any payment of money.
Okay, thank you, Gavin. All right, so what stands out to you in the laws regarding servants/slaves?
They're supposed to treat Hebrew slaves different than other slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And that being is after 7 years, they're supposed to set them free.
Yeah, you got some interesting ones. There's always this recollection of, hey, remember you guys were slaves too, so let's treat you a little bit differently. And then on top of it, you have set up that this is not supposed to be just this lifelong indentured servitude sort of thing that you're in it and you can't get out of it. But even after 7 years, you can release them. There was an exception noted. What's the exception to where 7 years are up, but the slave might have a choice to make?
If he didn't bring his wife with him.
Yeah. So
got married after he was already a slave.
Got married after he's a slave, and it seems like that his wife is a slave of that same household, and so her time would not be finished. And so there's a specific law to allow for what?
And to continue as a slave?
Well, because what really is he choosing to do?
To stay with his wife.
Yeah, we have laws, God made laws in place to keep families together, because she is also this female slave in this case, who is still owned by the person and still will have that period of time after 7 years where she will be set free. But yeah, so God makes purposeful laws of keeping the family together, protecting the women particularly, and also that this is not a forever thing, that you get stuck into this slave class and you're just there forever after and there's no way out. No, God very purposely made it so that you can leave this life. Another thing, and this will come up again as we are kind of going through more of this, but kind of just like polygamy in especially the book of Genesis, you see it happening, and even God makes, you'll see later, actually I'm not sure if I think it's in Deuteronomy, so it might not be in this section. God makes a law about divorce. So then a wrong assumption is to sit here and say, well, since God, made laws for slaves, we should have slaves. That's no. God is saying, I know you're going to make people slaves, so I want laws governing them. I want to make sure there's an appropriate treatment of them. Same with divorce is, no, I don't want divorce, but I know you will do things that will cause divorce, so I'm going to make laws that protect people through this. So that's not, don't take the application of because there's laws governing slaves, therefore slavery is good. It's God ordained. No. However, you could have a fun little exercise of whether or not slavery is a good thing, because we look at it very differently as American citizens. There is at least one good use of the term slavery in the Bible, and it comes in the book of Romans, where it talks about us being slaves to righteousness, meaning this is what you belong to. This is the master you serve. You serve righteousness. So there's a positive way to use it, but please don't use the laws of Exodus 21 to say, yes, we should all own slaves. But you can't necessarily say all slavery is always bad. You can't say that either. So there is at least one form of good slavery that the Bible gives you.
Well, and the alternative is that not are we having slaves, that we are the slaves.
Yeah.
Because we could be pushed into that situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, you always think of it as, well, we're prosperous and stuff. We would be the ones having the slaves. But it's not necessarily that way. We might be the slaves.
Yeah, this was much more of, this is a way to earn a living, and so God wanted laws governing it. Were you going to say something, Gav?
Julia says them to stay together. I got a little bit late to that.
Oh, okay. But yeah, Julia noted too, let the family stay together. We have laws. God made laws governing that. All right. So you do have an example here too. Exodus 21:10. If he marries another woman, so now we are talking polygamy. Polygamy, like this is page 39 in the study guide, polygamy, like many other sins, including divorce, is an expression of the hardness of people's hearts and is contrary to God's will. God's ideal from the beginning was for one man to marry one woman and for the couple to remain in an exclusive sexual relationship for as long as both partners were alive. Biblical evidence for this is found in the fact that God created woman as a uniquely suitable helper for one man, Adam. When the pair disobeyed God, they could no longer implement many aspects of God's plan for human life. Because of sin, conflict, oppression, and death became part of the human landscape. People's sinful nature often leads to sexual misconduct, as in the case of Lamech, the first recorded polygamist in Genesis 4. Men will be inclined to take multiple sexual partners for themselves. The law presented here and in other laws in the Torah, so that's the instruction, the commandments, is not meant to condone polygamy. It is not an expression of God's ideal, but a concession to humanity's hard-heartedness. The law recognized the male sexual inclinations, but seeks to limit the injury to women that could result. All wives must be given adequate food, clothing, and intimacy. Far from approving polygamy, the law of Moses discourages it by placing high demands on anyone who chooses this option, and it preserves the essential rights of polygamy's potential victims. So, yeah, a little bit different way to look at these laws. Instead of saying, like, yeah, let them do that. No, God's saying, like, I'm going to make it harder for you if you want to do this. So here's what you have to do. Okay. Ready to keep going? All right, so we're going to go the rest of chapter 21. And then think about regarding recompense for personal injuries. Are there any laws here that you think are too harsh? What is the overriding principle when it comes to personal injury? So let's listen to Mr. Max McLean again.
Anyone who strikes a person with a fatal blow is to be put to death. However, if it is not done intentionally, but God lets it happen, they are to flee to a place I will designate. But if anyone schemes and kills someone deliberately, that person is to be taken from my altar and put to death. Anyone who attacks their father or mother is to be put to death. Anyone who kidnaps someone is to be put to death, whether the victim has been sold or is still in the kidnapper's possession. Anyone who curses their father or mother is to be put to death. If people quarrel and one person hits another with a stone or with their fist, and the victim does not die but is confined to bed, the one who struck the blow will not be held liable if the other can get up and walk around outside with a staff. However, the guilty party must pay the injured person for any loss of time and see that the victim is completely healed. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. But they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. If people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman, and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. An owner who hits a male or female slave in the eye and destroys it must let the slave go free to compensate for the eye. And an owner who knocks out the tooth of a male or female slave must let the slave go free to compensate for the tooth. If a bull gores a man or woman to death, the bull is to be stoned to death, and its meat must not be eaten. But the owner of the bull will not be held responsible. If, however, the bull has had the habit of goring, and the owner has been warned but has not kept it penned up, and it kills a man or woman, the bull is to be stoned, and its owner also is to be put to death. However, if payment is demanded, the owner may redeem his life by the payment of whatever is demanded. This law also applies if the bull gores a son or daughter. If the bull gores a male or female slave, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of the slave, and the bull is to be stoned to death. If anyone uncovers a pit or digs one and fails to cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the one who opened the pit must pay the owner for the loss and take the dead animal in exchange. If anyone's bull injures someone else's bull and it dies, the two parties are to sell the live one and divide both the money and the dead animal equally. However, if it was known that the bull had the habit of goring, yet the owner did not keep it penned up, the owner must pay animal for animal and take the dead animal in exchange.
Okay. So anything in there that you thought that's really super harsh?
I'm surprised that an eye and a tooth are held on the same level. Because it says an owner who hits a male or female servant in the eye and destroys it must let the slave go free to compensate for the eye. The owner who knocks out the tooth of a male or female slave must let the slave go free to compensate for the tooth.
So I'm going to go on a limb because this is something I wanted to talk about. So I think we all have heard those words quite often, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. How have you understood those words prior to reading this section today? How have you understood those words? Because this will get to answer your question, I think. But how have you understood those words? No one wants to play on that one?
Oh, it was my question, so I guess I'll
What do we got? We got some popping
Okay.
up here.
So your mom says the punishment should fit the crime, and Jeff Evie says whatever you do to someone is the same. Whatever you do to someone, the same is done to you as punishment.
Okay, so two really good answers. So Jeff's answer is how I often understood these words. If you knock out a tooth, I get to knock out one of your teeth, like tooth for tooth, like that. But really, it's more when you look through the surrounding context and what the section Gavin was referring to. It's about fair compensation. It's not specifically, hey, you burn me, well, I get to go burn you back. It's not a law of revenge. It's a law of compensation. So it's like, okay, if I knock out your eye, you have one less eye, so you can still function in life and still get along. All right, well, the fair compensation God says is I should let you free. And I knock out your tooth, which means I took physical violence to you, which is probably the same thing as the eye. I took physical violence to you. I knocked out your tooth. I was wrong. I should let you go free. So in both cases, it's just fair compensation. It's not about the actual thing. It's about what you did to that person. Is there a fair compensation for it? Does that make sense, Gav?
Yeah, I was just my surprise was based on an eye and a tooth. Both were the compensation is being set free. To me, an eye is worth more than a tooth.
Yeah, you probably, I think in our thought it is, but it's I would look at it more as what's the cause of what you made them lose. It's probably they were being beaten. Mm-hmm. And so if you caused the eye or you knocked out a tooth, you got to let them go free because you went violent on your slave. Mm-hmm. How dare you? You let them free now. That's the fair compensation. Yeah. So that's how I've understood it.
It takes a lot to knock somebody's teeth out.
It does.
They're in there pretty good.
And what you said, like a tooth is worth less than an eye because you got two eyes. You got
32.
32 teeth?
Yeah.
Okay. 32 teeth. You got more. You got more teeth. So yeah, that's where I can understand the like actual value of each. It seems higher. But yeah, more it's about compensation. What is fair? It's not a law of revenge. So there's another.
The bull thing made me wonder if that applies to other animals as well, as in if someone knowingly keeps a violent dog.
And we kind of work that. Who wrote that?
That was Julia.
Julia. Yeah, we kind of work that way in our society, and I think that's appropriate because you hear those stories. The one I think of most recently was like a 3-year-old had a sock on his hand and stuck it through a chain link fence in Layton, and dog bit off the hand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Where it's like, it wasn't, from what I understood, I don't remember. Marlis, do you know, did they euthanize the dog?
I don't remember.
I don't remember either. And in that case, that you are looking at, has this dog shown these tendencies prior? Is this just a mistake because you put a toy on the hand? Can you blame the dog for biting on it? So there is this idea. But, if your dog has bit a second person, you can better believe that dog will get put down. Unless there's I'm sure there's probably maybe an extenuating circumstance of kids have been teasing the dog and, causing it to lash out. But generally speaking, yeah, if your dog has a habit of biting somebody, that dog will get put down.
I think there's a Texas law that says that if your dog bites someone, it has to be put down.
Yeah, because I
Within
would believe
24
that.
hours.
I would believe that.
And I think it doesn't matter for the most part.
So I'm not sure about all state laws governing it, but in general, you often hear that the dogs are put down if they bit somebody. But I think they do take into consideration, was the dog provoked, or even in like kind of like the case of the 3-year-old, kind of the dog was tricked. Like you put a sock out, you play tug of war with a dog with a sock. It's a game. I don't expect your hand to be inside of it. And so it's kind of like, well, the dog wasn't trying to harm you.
Especially a really tiny hand.
Yeah. So I don't know what actually happened, but so yeah, I do think the bull, it's known for goring. It happened once. Okay, it's a fluke, but this is my livestock is my livelihood. Don't just destroy it. But if it gores somebody else, okay, you got a violent bull on your hands and you're going to have to put it down. Yeah, at least, again, recompense and don't harm other people with it. Okay. Are there any other ones on there?
No.
Okay. Anyone else? Laws that seem too harsh? I got 2 that I think were too harsh, but I'm saving them.
The cursing your parents.
Yeah.
That one's kind of, because kids are not the smartest beings on earth.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be taught. And I don't know if that is that like something that applies to adults, or is that like your 2-year-old?
Well, yeah. So first of all, recognize curse as it truly is in the Bible. So we talk about cursing and we're just throwing foul language into that, or stuff like that. But a curse is,
May God burn down your house.
yeah, God damn you to hell. Yeah. So they are actually asking God to cast a person into hell. That's what you're doing with a curse.
All right.
So now does that make more sense? Because a
That makes
2-year-old's
sense.
probably not going to do that unless they're repeating their parents who say it to other people.
Right. Right.
Which then you got a bigger problem.
Right. Well, and that goes very much against the honor your father and mother.
And
right
that's, yeah. So that one is one of those that seems very much on that too harsh spectrum, but it's understanding too, what are you doing? So you're doing it with definitely a kid who should know what the difference is between cursing, being angry. Yeah. In your anger, do not sin, as God would say. But are you actually using this to say, I wish you were in hell right now. In fact, I'm asking God to send you to hell, because that's really what a curse is.
Well, and if it's at that point, they are probably doing something to actively cause harm to their parents.
Yeah, which goes back to the earlier law about anyone who attacks his father or mother must be put to death. Because that one, I wondered if somebody might think of that. But maybe you guys kind of see what I saw right away. I'm like, okay, you're in the desert. You don't have local county jails and things like that. Your son or daughter is literally trying to kill you. You cannot just keep this person around you. your life is in danger by this. So that's where it's like it's kind of more of an understood. It's why we have capital punishment still. Again, governed more on a state-to-state basis. Yeah, if you think about your kid actually trying to kill you, yeah. So it does teach too. Again, the honor of your father and mother is held in very high regard, because again, who are these? They're God's representatives. That's what your parents are. They're God's representatives here on earth. The kidnapper, yeah, that one was one of them, like, oof. But again, I was remembering, you're wandering around the wilderness. You don't have jails and things like that set up to lock this person away so that they don't harm anyone. Because yeah, what are they doing in kidnapping the person? I mean, I guess we generally think of kidnappers generally do it for a ransom, or they're doing it for much more violent and heinous intent. I think that's the scarier part of it. It's just, I don't think we're looking at the kidnapper as being one to like, well, I'm going to withhold them from you till I get my money. I mean, you're one big giant community. The kid will be found, but you're probably kidnapping them to do something far worse. So it's to prevent that violence against people.
And you can't do that. People don't like it when you kidnap people.
No, not good. Yeah, got, what was that, Amber Alert on?
Yeah, I got
Friday
like
morning?
2 of them all of a sudden. It was like one was a black Toyota Camry and the other one was like, I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, that's why they send that stuff out. Okay, good. Move on.
Oh, I had one.
Okay,
I
yeah.
thought it was interesting that it's like, if you're having an argument and then you pick up a rock or your fist or something and you hit them and then you kill them, it's a problem. But if you don't kill them and they can still walk around, it's okay.
Again, fair compensation.
Yeah.
Like if I just get a bruise, I'm going to heal from it.
But it's like if you can walk around with a cane.
And that's the thing. And you still have to compensate for their loss of
Oh,
time.
yeah, you got to make
and
sure that
work.
they
So
recover. You're right.
So again, it's laws of compensation really is what it is, not so much laws of revenge. So I thought that was, to me, that was important to note, because I think these verses get abused as a law of revenge when really it's about a law of compensation. How do I fairly take care of a person I have injured? So yeah. All right. Good. Okay. Oh, yeah, and I wanted to, are these laws unlike any other laws? This is back on page 39 of the study guide. Archaeologists have found law codes of other nations from this period of history. A famous code they discovered, for example, is the Code of Hammurabi, king of Babylon, who lived around 1700 BC, several hundred years before Moses. In its outward form, Hammurabi's code is similar to that which God gave Moses. The difference lies in the content. The codes of heathen nations were made to praise the king. The code of Moses praises the works of the Lord. Heathen law codes reflect the wishes of an earthly ruler. The code of Moses expressed how Israel is to live as a people of God. One can see these differences in all the regulations, whether pertaining to slavery, marriage, witchcraft, property, or whatever the case may be. Mosaic ordinances as given by God are far more considerate of the rights of people and far less cruel in the penalties for disobedience. So even the ones that we did, these are less on the scale comparatively to other codes of that day. Okay. Yeah, law of retaliation. This is page 40. A law that people often ask about is contained in Exodus 21, 23 to 25. There is a serious injury, or take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, etc. This is so-called lex talionis, a law of retaliation, which states that the punishment should be proportionate to the crime. People often use this as an example of how harsh and primitive the Old Testament laws were when compared with our more compassionate and advanced laws of today. Let us know, however, that this law of retaliation was restricted to serious cases involving actual bodily harm. Let us note furthermore that in those days when such cases were customarily dealt with through revenge, this law served to emphasize that the retaliation by revenge should not exceed whatever damage had been inflicted. In other words, it served to check passionate acts of vengeance, which could result in death. Finally, we need to remember that these laws were given by God to regulate decency and order in the society of that time. These were civil regulations, not moral decrees. Israel was governed by a theocracy in which the church and government were not separated, as we experience under the Constitution of the United States of America. We need to keep this difference in mind as we consider all the rules and regulations in this part of the Sinaitic Law Code. It might be added that there is no case on record where the eye for eye principle was actually carried out to the extent that a person who inflicted serious damage to another person's body was likewise actually inflicted with the same damage as punishment. All right. Okay, we'll go on. Chapter 22, and we're going to read into chapter 23, verse 19.
You know, just taking out, that's interesting.
Oh, yeah, that is in 21. Okay, yeah, the 30 shekels. I forgot. I thought it was in the next chapter. But yeah, this is an interesting little note. So yeah, thanks for reading that and pointing it out, Eric. The 30 shekels at the end of 21, 30 shekels of silver is probably a reference to Jesus's betrayal, meaning that he was sold by Judas for the price of a dead slave. That's actually really interesting. So, yeah, the price put on Jesus has some Old Testament references. There is another one too regarding Jeremiah in a field, but this also points at it. Okay, so let's go on. Exodus 22. Oh yeah, sorry. So as we read through this, are there any laws you don't understand or you want clarified? And if we had something similar in the U.S., do we have something similar in the U.S.? What would those laws look like? That's what I want you to think through as we read through this section.
Exodus 22. Whoever steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it must pay back 5 head of cattle for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. If a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck a fatal blow, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed. But if it happens after sunrise, the defender is guilty of bloodshed. Anyone who steals must certainly make restitution. But if they have nothing, they must be sold to pay for their theft. If the stolen animal is found alive in their possession, whether ox or donkey or sheep, they must pay back double. If anyone grazes their livestock in a field or vineyard and lets them stray and they graze in someone else's field, the offender must make restitution from the best of their own field or vineyard. If a fire breaks out and spreads into thorn bushes so that it burns shocks of grain or standing grain or the whole field, the one who started the fire must make restitution. If anyone gives a neighbor silver or goods for safekeeping and they are stolen from the neighbor's house, the thief, if caught, must pay back double. But if the thief is not found, the owner of the house must appear before the judges, and they must determine whether the owner of the house has laid hands on the other person's property. In all cases of illegal possession of an ox, a donkey, a sheep, a garment, or any other lost property about which somebody says, "This is mine," both parties are to bring their cases before the judges. The one whom the judges declare guilty must pay back double to the other. If anyone gives a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to their neighbor for safekeeping, and it dies or is injured or is taken away while no one is looking, the issue between them will be settled by the taking of an oath before the Lord that the neighbor did not lay hands on the other person's property. The owner is to accept this, and no restitution is required. But if the animal was stolen from the neighbor, restitution must be made to the owner. If it was torn to pieces by a wild animal, the neighbor shall bring in the remains as evidence and shall not be required to pay for the torn animal. If anyone borrows an animal from their neighbor and it is injured or dies while the owner is not present, they must make restitution. But if the owner is with the animal, the borrower will not have to pay. If the animal was hired, the money paid for the hire covers the loss. If a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married and sleeps with her, he must pay the bride price, and she shall be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must still pay the bride price for virgins. Do not allow a sorceress to live. Anyone who has sexual relations with an animal is to be put to death. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord must be destroyed. Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt. Do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. If you do, and they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. My anger will be aroused, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will become widows, and your children fatherless. If you lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, do not treat it like a business deal. Charge no interest. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, return it by sunset, because that cloak is the only covering your neighbor has. What else can they sleep in? When they cry out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. Do not blaspheme God or curse the ruler of your people. Do not hold back offerings from your granaries or your vats. You must give me the firstborn of your sons. Do the same with your cattle and your sheep. Let them stay with their mothers for 7 days, but give them to me on the 8th day. You are to be my holy people. So do not eat the meat of an animal torn by wild beasts. Throw it to the dogs.
Okay, you want to hit the next chapter, Gavin? We're going to read up through verse 19.
Exodus 23. Do not spread false reports. Do not help a guilty person by being a malicious witness. Do not follow the crowd in doing wrong. When you give testimony in a lawsuit, do not pervert justice by siding with the crowd. And do not show favoritism to a poor person in a lawsuit. If you come across your enemy's ox or donkey wandering off, be sure to return it. If you see the donkey of someone who hates you fallen down under its load, do not leave it there. Be sure you help them with it. Do not deny justice to your poor people in their lawsuits. Have nothing to do with a false charge, and do not put an innocent or honest person to death, for I will not acquit the guilty. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds those who see and twists the words of the innocent. Do not oppress a foreigner. You yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners, because you were foreigners in Egypt. For 6 years you are to sow your fields and harvest the crops. But during the 7th year, let the land lie unplowed and unused. Then the poor among your people may get food from it, and the wild animals may eat what is left. Do the same with your vineyard and your olive grove. 6 days do your work, but on the 7th day do not work, so that your ox and your donkey may rest, and so that the slave born in your household and the foreigner living among you may be refreshed. Be careful to do everything I have said to you. Do not invoke the names of other gods. Do not let them be heard on your lips. 3 times a year you are to celebrate a festival to me. Celebrate the festival of unleavened bread. For 7 days eat bread made without yeast, as I commanded you. Do this at the appointed time in the month of Aviv, for in that month you came out of Egypt. No one is to appear before me empty-handed. Celebrate the festival of harvest with the first fruits of the crops you sow in your field. Celebrate the festival of ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather in your crops from the field. 3 times a year, all the men are to appear before the sovereign Lord. Do not offer the blood of a sacrifice to me along with anything containing yeast. The fat of my festival offerings must not be kept until morning. Bring the best of the first fruits of your soil to the house of the Lord your God. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk.
Okay. So laws that you want clarified or that you don't understand. I got a couple.
No cream sauce on the goat.
So the goat mother's milk one was one that it is the last one we end on, and it's like, that's weird. Okay, so here's what I read up on that. So the first one is from the People's Bible Commentary. It says, archaeological discoveries of more recent years, particularly the Rosh Shamra tablets at ancient Ugarit, show that the Canaanites prepared such a dish at their festal ceremonies, which were part of their pagan fertility rites. The heathen Canaanites believed that boiling a baby goat in its own mother's milk was a way of persuading Baal to grant the blessings of fertility. This probably sheds the best light upon this passage. The Lord is speaking here of religious festivals and various rites that were to be observed in their celebration. He's warning his people not to celebrate as the pagans did, but to bring their thank offerings according to his direction. Even the suggestion or appearance of honoring foreign gods is to be strictly avoided. That was a really helpful note.
That is very helpful.
Another one, this is from the Lutheran Study Bible. Rabbinic texts ascribe this practice to the Ishmaelites. Milking the mother and then boiling her kid in that milk is painfully ironic and disrespectful toward the life-giving relationships God established between the creatures and the people they feed and sustain. This law reinforces the fact that animals were used for food, but it also enforces an attitude of respect and care for animals as living creatures. So two different kind of thoughts on it. Either it was tied to the Canaanite fertility worship of Baal, or it was just, that's just mean. It's kind of mean. The boil the kid in the mother's milk. So yeah, that's the I needed that one clarified when I went through this.
How about chicken omelets? That sounds amazing.
Not the same.
Not the same.
Not the same.
Julia says, do not allow a sorceress to live.
Yeah. Again, because a sorceress, witchcraft, that there's nothing good in witchcraft. It is seeking Satan's help. I mean, sometimes there's talk of white magic and black magic. Like white magic is a pure magic. It's all not God. And so in that way, it's a pagan religion that would be harmful to the belief of God's people. And so, yeah, no sorceries. So anyone who is practicing it, because guess what? There are Israelites who end up practicing sorcery. We do have stories of that later on. But God says, nope, get rid of that. Because again, he's a jealous God. He's not going to share you with other religions, other gods. So good. Any other ones?
I have one.
Yeah, Marlis.
22, 2 and 3. If the thief is caught breaking in at night and he's killed, that's okay. But if it's after sunrise, then the defender is accused of bloodshed. So what's the difference?
Because in the daytime, you can actually see who it is and what they're doing. So it is kind of the difference of, we're kind of assuming that breaking in the night, you can't see what's going on, and you can't see what kind of blows you are striking to stop this person, because this is talking about a thief. So they're not coming to harm you. They're coming to take your stuff. So what you should be doing is handing them over to law enforcement, not killing them. And in daytime, you can see them. And so if you can see them, see what they're doing, and you kill them, you're guilty of bloodshed. You're going extreme beyond what the crime should get.
So in Utah, there is stand your ground law and castle law. More applicable is the castle law. And it says that, and there have been cases where somebody broke into somebody's house, and if the homeowner finds somebody who's broken into the house, there have been occasions where they found them, they couldn't tell if they had a weapon, they hadn't detected them yet, and they shot them at the back. And then it was okay because they didn't know what they were there for. And
Yeah.
but if you can tell that they're unarmed, then that causes legal issues.
So Marlis, if somebody during the day was breaking into your kitchen and stealing your bread, you would call the police and get them arrested. You wouldn't pull out your.
But if it's a knife, then
Conceal.
you can shoot them.
Well, that's the thing. If they're threatening your life, and that's the difference, because this is listed specifically as a thief.
How
So
you
it's
know
somebody
they're a
coming to
thief at
steal.
night? They could be somebody
Yeah,
there to harm you.
And that's what the difference is can you actually see what they're doing or not?
And then if they are there to harm you, I think there's other laws that are outlined in other sections that talk about self-defense.
Mhm.
And I think at that point it would fall into a different section.
Yeah. So does that help?
mhm.
So yeah, again, remember, the laws governing the Israelites are not going to be necessarily our laws. And so you can critique them, but just understanding that God is saying, well, there's a difference of when you can't see the person, can't see what they're doing, and you defend yourself and you kill them, versus you can see exactly what they're doing. And that's not a crime punishable by death. So you would be, if you could knowingly see they're just trying to steal from you, to kill them would be then you're guilty of the bloodshed, because you can see what you're doing. Yeah. Any other ones that are like, I would like to understand that better, get that clarified?
It seems like there's a lot of specificity in some of this stuff. Like this is stuff that's happened. Like if a fire breaks out and spreads into thorn bushes so that it burns shocks of grain or standing grain in the whole field, the one who started the fire must make restitution. Seems like it's case law.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, it's
Observation.
interesting. Yeah. And then not every conceivable situation is brought up here, but there's obviously like, yep, we can envision this. So God's like, yep, take care of this. And he's letting, because we already had that section too, where they have these judges now in place under the advice of Jethro to settle the other matters that aren't specifically outlined. Who's at fault? What should you do?
Well, this is kind of like their civil law.
Yeah, it absolutely is their civil.
They don't have anything written yet. God's doing it for them.
Yeah, because now they are becoming a nation. They're being a part of Egypt, governed by Egypt's laws. So, any other ones? Danielle?
It says whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord must be destroyed. Why is it destruction as opposed to merely being wiped out?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure. I have a great answer. I did note that as well.
Well, the note in my 1984, I don't know.
Yeah, you-
Bible,
Probably the same one as me.
yeah, it says that the Hebrew term refers to the irrevocable giving over of things or persons to the Lord, often by totally destroying them, which didn't really help me answer the question.
Yeah, so I would be okay. What just because I'm not finding it right away. What chapter and verse?
22,
20.
20.
22:20. There it is. All right, 22:20. Yeah, we've got the same Bible because I got the same note.
I had some too.
By totally destroying them, what does that mean? I mean, I'm assuming it would be like a stoning.
But the Hebrew term refers to the irrevocable giving over of things or persons to the Lord.
I think it's everything that belongs to them also gets destroyed instead of inherited.
Okay. Then I guess, again, why total destruction is.
Like their family, and wouldn't it kind of be the same line?
I mean,
Women and
the sorceress
children.
is just going to
See-
be killed as opposed to being totally destroyed.
I'm just going to say I will try to look at that one some more because I don't necessarily think that's going to include their family, but it could, like Eric brought up, it could include the family. So I'm going to have to write a note and research that one some more of why that specific phrase is used and what does that entail. So I will.
guess it also
do
kind of brings up why are they not doing that to sorceresses?
Yeah, because it just says put to death.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming, that's why I'm assuming there's a property thing involved too. Like you're not going to inherit their wealth. We're going to destroy it. That's what I'm assuming, but I'm going to look into that and see if I can find a better answer. That's a good question. Good question. All right. So I got one. I got a Gav.
So your mother says, once Jesus paid the sacrifice, were these laws obsolete?
So realize there's a little bit different thing going on here. Like we talked about, there's three kind of categories of laws. Moral, which that's just standing morality for all time. And that gets summarized as the 10 Commandments, which gets summarized even further as love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And then there's the ceremonial laws, and those are the worship laws that are going to point you ahead to Jesus and have him be a direct fulfillment of that. And then there's what we're really dealing with here, which is civil laws. This is the governing of the nation. We are not members of the nation of Israel. Can we learn things from their laws? Yes, but because we're not part of their nation, and we're not governed by these laws. So this one isn't really so much about the fulfillment of Christ as it is, that's not our government. So this is a different government for different people at a different time. We can still learn things from it, but yeah, the fulfillment would be more in line with the ceremonial laws, the worship laws, and the moral just, it applies universally. So that's my answer to that one. Okay, other laws to be clarified, questions, etc. I'll throw out the other one I had the mother's milk one, but the other one is so I can never charge interest on loans. It was a common practice. In Babylon, people were permitted to charge up to 20 to 50% interest on loans. Holy cow. And I kind of balk sometimes at 6%, and we're talking 20 to 50. But pretty much here, when it comes to lending to fellow Israelites, the Lord's people were to follow different standard of interest, not to be charged on loans. It seems that God was teaching his people not to profit from the hardship of fellow Israelites. So that's where you wouldn't charge interest to them and just pay back what you owe. And that's a good thing. All right, unless there are other questions or other ones, I'm gonna wrap it up for today. You can always ask more next week, of course. Was there any more on there, Gav, or has we got everybody?
Everybody got on there. I had a question.
Okay,
So,
Gavin.
28 and 29, it says don't do these things, but there's not really anything outlined for like a restitution or a punishment or anything like that. Maybe I missed it, but I don't know. It's just saying don't do it. Well, what if I do it?
Well, it's kind of, yeah. They will have more laws that will govern those things. Like I kind of look, when you come next to it, it is about, okay, so don't hold back your offerings from your granaries or your vats. It talks about what else to give. And then kind of verse 31, you are to be my holy people. So yeah, don't do that because that's not in line with who you are.
Okay.
So not so much and this is the penalty for doing it, although it does outline it in some other places. It is more like, these are my expectations of you as my people. This is how you're going to live. And that's why. It's because you are my holy people. So don't do these things.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as what it would look like in the U.S., I mean, we still do swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Sometimes you can add, so help me God. That's not mandated anymore. There are paid holidays occasionally, but not everyone gets a paid holiday like the Israelites got. Good Samaritan laws, those vary state to state. So that's a little bit harder, but like you can't get sued for helping someone. Because yeah, there is amount of legal protection, sadly, of like you can get sued for doing a good thing when you were trying to do a good thing, because sometimes you might do a good thing, but the person didn't want you to do the good thing, or you did the good thing wrong and you caused them more injury. And then they want to exact more out of you. So, and then I also thought of the Hippocratic Oath, which applies more to doctors. And I always thought in the Hippocratic Oath, it has the phrase, do no harm. Turns out it doesn't. It's summarized to say that, but the actual Hippocratic Oath is fairly lengthy. I'm not going to read it all, but it basically is saying, I'm going to give appropriate medical measures to people. It's basically what it says. It doesn't really actually say, do no harm. But it's saying where I can help, I will help. I will help what is reasonable into these situations. Yeah. Okay. So we will pause it there. I got at least one thing to look up and figure out why is it saying it that way. And we'll see if I can get an answer. Hopefully I will. But let's close with prayer. Lord, you give us these laws, and again, a different time, a different place, and we don't fully understand all of them. But it is enough to know these are laws to guide us and to guide the Israelites into living as your holy people. And in what we do in our 21st century, in our culture, in our climate, in our state, may we live in ways that bring glory to your name, in ways that are befitting to that we too are called your holy people. Help us to live and abide by the laws that bring you glory. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, so thank you, everybody. We'll keep going through Exodus next week. So, bye.